There is a lot of controversial talk that is worth taking seriously surrounding the so-called Muslim world and Islam. You will hear many established public figures debate, often quite aggressively, about whether Islam is compatible with Western values or whether faithful Muslims can ever fully integrate into or coexist with so-called modern liberal democracies. And often packed into these debates are such subsidiary questions as whether the majority of Muslims read the Quran literally as a guide to life in the modern world, which so-called version of Sharia law is most authentically Islamic, and so on. The only problem is, for us, Islam itself does not, and cannot, actually exist. Why do I say this? Consider what the word Islam actually means. According to the online etymology dictionary, the word Islam derives from the Arabic word aslama, which means either that he resigns, he surrenders, or he's submitted. Thus, according to Islamic scholar Syed Hossein Nasser, Islam is the only major religion, along with Buddhism, whose name is not related to a person or ethnic group, but to the central idea of the religion. This idea, as we have just established, is submission. Submission to what? God, or Allah. The Quran refers variously to such Jews and Christian scriptural figures, like Moses, Noah, and Jesus, as Muslims, because of their submission to God through apparently preaching his values. Furthermore, since the entire world and mankind are supposed to be God's creation within this view, it must in fact be the case that all human beings, as well as all animals and plant life, are Muslims at their generation, and so the mere fact of being a non-Muslim is considered by Muslims to be evidence of infidelity or apostasy, and not merely of being unsaved or sinful as in Christianity or Judaism. Notice, however, that there is nothing here that actually circumscribes membership within a particular group. The word Islam denotes a state of submission towards God and his law, but implies nothing on its own about what one must do to enter into this state. There are of course sentences in the Quran, as well as in the various hadith reports and various works of so-called Islamic jurisprudence and Islamic philosophy, which give different ideas about what is involved in being actually a Muslim, but many of these works disagree with each other, and with such profundity, that in some cases entire countries of people within the Muslim community have separated into their own distinct groups. So for an outsider to say that any one of these perspectives is the correct one, is by itself, at the very least, doubtful. But you might have already noticed an even bigger problem starting to take shape. Namely, that Islam does not simply refer to a state of being, but to a state of being with respect to a specific object, namely, God. If you are an atheist and don't believe in God, or if you do believe in God, but not the same God or the same kind of God as self-identified Muslims do, then the very possibility of being a Muslim in the first place is dubious. How do you submit to that which does not, or is not believed to exist? This is actually an extremely important point. If the definition of a Muslim is one who submits to God, and the God in question does not exist, then on what basis do us from the outside identify what is part of the so-called Muslim world and what is not? Do not Christians believe that they submit to their God? Are they, therefore, Muslims and part of the Muslim world? What about Hindus, Mormons, the ancient Greeks? Are they Muslims? It seems to me that when Muslims and the so-called Islamic world are referenced in conversation, that what is happening is a tendency to fold everyone who calls themselves a Muslim into the same group. But you can see already how this is hugely inadequate. Consider, is every country or political party that has democratic in their names an adherent of democratic values? Why would we conflate the one and not the other? To say that Iran, Somalia, and Malcolm X are somehow of the same group is surely absurd on its face, not only because the massive distances in time, culture, and geography make each of these entirely dissimilar to each other, but because if put into a room, representatives of each would almost certainly not regard one another as belonging to the same group. It would be almost like if space aliens were to visit Earth and after observing that both the United States, the United Arab Emirates, and the Soviet Union all have some derivation of unity in their names, that they must all be part of the same political bloc. In sum, to us outsiders, Islam does not and cannot exist, at least not in the way self-identifying Muslims think it does. And so the ways in which we talk about and deal with self-identifying Muslims and self-identifying Muslim organizations in the real world and in politics should reflect this. It is absolutely ridiculous that when we are talking about serious issues like ISIS, female genital mutilation, and the possibility of political stability within and peace with countries like Iran, Iraq, and Syria, that we fall back almost every time on stupid platitudes about how all of these things just come out of the Quran. Since not even people who identify as Muslims agree that everyone who self-identifies as a Muslim is on the same side or part of the same community, why on earth should we who are viewing this from the outside? Food for thought. Thank you for listening.